Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Well, good morning, and welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing well, and how about you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about romantic love. The story of Valentine is pretty complex and has taken many forms and shapes through the years, but the gist of the day is romantic love. The Kriya Yoga spin on the dynamics of romantic love is explained by levels of consciousness and degrees of awareness. Swami will explain the value of a primary relationship with the divine as a springboard to enrich intimate interpersonal relationships. We will discuss the differences between the individual's concept of love from various levels of consciousness. Not all we call love is true love. Desire is the fire, and it all comes down to the fuel. So, Swami, I looked up on dictionary.com the word romance, and it's interesting how many different terms come up. And I'm looking at under the verb where it says, to invent or relate romances, indulge in fanciful or extravagant stories or daydreams. So it made me think about that maybe Valentine's Day kind of puts a lot of pressure on people to have like this spectacular, romantic kind of a day. And more often than not, I think to some people it falls short of people's expectations.
Well, again, I think that comes down to the individual. Because to romanticize something means to use your imagination, to use your creativity, to color the event. And I think what happens is a lot of us are passively waiting for that to happen from the outside rather than proactively generating it from the inside, using your creativity, using your imagination, and coloring, whatever it is that you're experiencing. That's one of the things that we really promote in Kriya Yoga, to use your creativity, use your imagination, change how you think about something, which in turn will affect how you feel and how you perform. You can change your attitude.
But what about, the people out there who are not in a relationship, with another human being, and Valentine's Day comes around and it just brings upon to some people, maybe a sense of loneliness and I don't have anybody, and what kind of advice would you give to those people?
Well, one of the things I would look at is just the word love in and of itself. And just kind of like the Eskimos have 70-some words for snow. In Greece, they actually have 4 words that they equate with the concept of love. That one is storge, which is like affection, philia, which is friendship, eros, which is the love between the sexes, and the final one is agape, which is man's love for God, or God's love for man, or humanity, and so, again, like you were saying, well, suppose I don't have somebody. Well, we're all in a relationship. We all have somebody. There is always going to be interpersonal relationships if you're on the planet, unless you're a hermit. And if you are a hermit, then, of course, you can have this relationship with your environment. People, you can romanticize nature. Thoreau did it, right? If you read in Walden, when he went to the woods, to confront life at its marrow, And so we're all in a relationship. But I think the key to what we teach in Kriya Yoga is this whole concept of this relationship with the divine, which is oftentimes the one that's missing in most of our repertoires, that we focus most of our attention on the outside world, what is in our environment. And we don't really cultivate this relationship with the divine, with the forces that are unchanging, that are permanent, which, again, is really directly associated with your creativity and your imagination. So the more that you draw upon endless possibilities, because there is really, there isn't any situation that we can't romanticize. If you really think about it, the difference between adventure and hardship is that adventure is hardship that is aesthetically perceived. It's like we're going camping, and it's exciting. We're going to, live in the woods. It's exciting because it's a choice. If all of a sudden you lose your house and now you're living in a tent, then it's a hardship. But the major, I think, adjustment, and the thing that we really try and promote in Kriya Yoga, is this ability to shape your inner state to fit those demands, to constantly keep yourself connected to your creativity, your imagination, so that you can constantly look for the positive spin on whatever it is that's happening. Because everything in life is physics. You cannot gain something where you don't lose something. You can't lose something where you don't gain something. And so the more that you have awareness of that, and the more proactive you are with your creativity, your imagination, the better, the easier it is for you to put yourself in a position of strength at all times, to always maintain your power. But for me, it always begins with this internal connection, with this primary relationship that I have with my divinity. And it's not some lofty, relationship with some astral image, but it's a very simple relationship with the forces that are really important to me. That as long as I have my number one need, that I've trained my body to respond with this feeling that I'm okay. And then from that stepping point, then I'm in a position of strength. And I also recognize that I have this thing called a mind. And I can generate thoughts. And I can emit these thoughts with intention. But it's this internal connection that really, I want to say, makes that possible.
So it sounds like that before I send a Valentine card to somebody, I need to send a Valentine card to Spirit or to my divinity. I have to have that in place before I can have any kind of a relationship, whether it's a love relationship or familial relationship, work relationship. To have healthy relationships, I have to have this one relationship first.
Well, to answer your question, you don't have to, but it will change them. That's one of the things that we talked about in the introduction, that the variables are my level of consciousness, my degree of awareness. Because it's all going to come down to what is it that I desire. That's like, that show that we did a number of weeks ago, Sex Out of Marriage is a Sin. And it was a string of words and could mean anything to anybody, just like the word love can mean anything to anybody. without further explanation or, a deeper understanding of what these terms mean. But, we all have this primary relationship. If you are alive, then you have this Christian concept of, God's love. Because the forces that are really important to you are intact. Now, what we don't have is appreciation. We don't have a sense of value, worth, and connectedness to this resource. That's the part that we have to build into it. And again, that was at one time, I think, or I like to think, the responsibility of our religions to educate people in how to actually love this number one need, how to love this secret source of sustenance, this invisible, intangible resource that's readily available to us. Because most of us come in and we have a love for something that's visible and tangible. Now, the difference is that the term in the religious community was called conversion. If you are a human being that runs off of things that are tangible, then you are connected to particles. If you are a human being that is connected to things that are invisible and tangible, then you are a human being that runs off of waves. But if you are a human being that runs off of this invisible, intangible resource, then you are, a human being that is of this divine nature. And so a big part of this concept of love is desire. And whatever it is that we desire will determine our nature.
So if someone is trying to build this relationship with their divinity and they look to, you had said earlier the phrase, they look to this astral image instead of this invisible, intangible source, what is the danger that might present to the person?
Well, the term in Kriya Yoga or in yoga in general is called avidya, ignorance. The term in, I want to say, the Judeo-Christian community was called sin. You're missing the mark. And, again, I think the more that we start to understand just what these terms meant, what you're doing is you're drawing from a resource that will not give you the return that you're looking for. And again, coming back to C.S. Lewis, I love the way he explained it, that we could save a lot of money by putting water in our cars instead of gasoline. But, of course, the car isn't going to run on water. And so that becomes part of the understanding that this human mind-body complex is not really designed to run off of particles or waves. It was engineered, it was designed to run off of this invisible, intangible source of sustenance. Now, we all understand the concept of the car because we all understand what we know cars are intended to do. They have combustion engines, and when they start up, there's all of these capabilities that we're familiar with. But we don't have leadership with regard to the human mind-body complex that has been started up. We are, for the most part, we are a population of humans that are in the larvae state. So we're, this mind-body complex that comes off of the assembly line with water in the gas tank. And just like if our automobiles came, if you found an automobile and it had water in the gas tank, there would be some things that you would have to do in order to get it to do what you know it was intended to do. And the same is true with the human mind-body complex. That we come in and we have this attachment to particles. We look for food, mother, and approval. That's our patterning, that's our programming, and that's what we desire. And the same with the vehicle. If you wanted to get it to work, you would have to get all of the water out of the gas tank, out of the fuel line, out of the filter, out of the fuel injector. And then you'd have to be sure that you put gas in the vehicle. Now remember, you're in an environment now where you're in a room and there are 3 containers. One has water, one has apple juice, and the other one has gasoline. Because that's kind of like what the human is up against. Reality is multidimensional. So we've got the choice. We can put particles, we can put waves, or we can put this indivisible unified field in. So when we mistaken, oftentimes we mistaken the waves for the invisible and intangible. Because it's invisible, but they are tangible. Thoughts are measurable. So the term would be called a sin, missing the mark. You're using the wrong resource. You're connected to the wrong source of sustenance. You are desiring the wrong energy field.
Well, I think that's a great place to pause for our program. So listeners, we'll be back with you shortly after we hear a word from our sponsors.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate.
If you are looking for a Samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Starting with the separation from mother, including the labors and tasks of the hero and the return as a whole person. Practice makes perfect only when practice is whole. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. Samadhi, or total consciousness, is experienced by knowing and doing with devotion. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
Well, welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you are listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. Well, before we get back to our program, I noticed we do have some listeners out there and wanted to know if any of them would like to ask any questions to Swami Jayananda at this time.
I'm just listening, thank you.
Okay, thank you, no problem. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, so Swami, what I'd like to do is let's get back and talking about desire and how you say desire is a fire and it all comes down to the fuel. I love that analogy that you just gave about the car. But I think there's still a lot of, I should say, maybe challenges that we have in this time because we're so inundated with this commercialism for Valentine's Day, and we do want to maybe try to use our imaginations and creativity when it comes to this celebration. So how should we express that, maybe to our loved ones and our families? How should we go about celebrating Valentine's Day?
Well, I don't know if I have, this is the only way to do it. I think the way that we do it is just fine. I think we could enrich the whole thing if we had this primary relationship with our divinity. One of the things, like we say, if we desire things from the outside world, then our concept of love is really more of a control drama. That it will be a lot of expectation and disappointment. And there's nothing wrong with expectation. In fact, that's one of the things that, I always recommend in relationships. Listen to what somebody says, watch what they do. And those are the comprehensive clues that you build your trust around. But it's a very different experience when we are competing for energy, drawing from the outside world, either particles or waves. If we draw from fear and limitation, then that's what happens to our relationships. But if we draw from truth and wholeness, then you're plugged into a resource that's inexhaustible. So your exchange of energy is you're not siphoning off. You're not looking for a return from the outside world. That was the concept of what I call love. Love, by definition, is human perfection. And for me, it really has very little to do with what goes on between human beings. It has everything to do with what goes on between the human being and your divinity. Because it is this primary relationship with this inexhaustible resource that now puts you in a position where you can unconditionally give, where you can give out with no need for a return. See, that's what I found that it did, was this primary relationship didn't negate intimate interpersonal relationship or even interpersonal relationship. It just made it smaller. Because you don't need another human being to be anything for you. If another human being doesn't do what you expect them to do, you're not in a life-threatening situation, or you shouldn't be. Unless, say, for example, you are in a position where my life depends on you doing something for me. See, I guess you got to be careful how you word things. But in general, it's like I don't need for you to take me to the movies tonight. But if you don't show up and we don't go to the movies and I'm responding as if I'm going to die because it didn't happen, then something's wrong with the picture. Because I am overreacting. And why? Because on some deep psychological level, I need, or I thought I needed for you to take me to the movies. Whereas if you have this primary relationship, you can actually gain objectivity. The term in Kriya Yoga is called detachment, that you now have some distance from that. And again, it's not like I'm not disappointed. I wanted to go to the movies. I was expecting to go to the movies. But I do not have to respond as if I'm going to die, because the forces that are really important to me are still intact. So I didn't negate it, but I made it smaller. It's way more manageable.
And that's what you're talking about when you say having this primary relationship enriches everything else in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, because not only are you able to have this objectivity, but you also are behind the forms. You're connected to your creativity, your imagination. So you're constantly infiltrating and refreshing the moments with your own thoughts, your own imagination. You can make anything whatever you want it to be. I look at the Super Bowl and I think, it's a football game. But we turn it into this something that is so big, so amazingly big. When in fact, what is it? It's a football game. So how do we do that? We enlarge it. We enliven it. And so once you're accustomed to seeing how that's being done, then you start to employ the same thing in your everyday life. I can make doing the dishes bigger than that Super Bowl.
I try to approach all household, I shouldn't call them chores, but duties in that way too. You just make everything fun, like you say. I think it comes down to some responsibility to each person too. Like if I'm looking for somebody to want to take me to the movies and they have no idea I want to go to the movies, I should ask for what I want, right? Don't you think it's actually kind of part of the responsibility of everybody to, say what they want instead of putting all this pressure on somebody who may not even know what it is that you need or that you want?
Well, I think the key to what you just said is just exactly that. It's what I want. It's not what I need. By reducing something to a want, now if you don't get it, you don't have to respond as if you're going to die. It's really helpful. But if you need to go to the movies and you don't get to go, then your heart's racing, your hands are sweating, and you're responding as if a saber-toothed tiger just stepped into the room and is going to devour you. So again, that becomes a practical guide for highly effective living. But you're not senselessly optimistic, you're not stupid, and you're not afraid to ask for what you want. Because you have this relationship with the forces that are establishing your sense of well-being, that you do have the benefit of internal support.
And these are the type of topics that we talk about, in our Theory 2 class on Thursday, this highly effective living. Like you say, how do we take yoga from the mat and pulling it to an everyday life? I mean, just because, Valentine's Day is coming up doesn't mean we only celebrate love on Valentine's Day. This should be something that we should employ every day, this love for our divinity.
Yeah, and also I like the whole concept of romanticizing my life. Why would I wait for just, February 14th where I can now start to be a little creative? I like to do it all the time. I like to make everything fun. And why wouldn't you? Constantly trying to enrich, look for meaning and purpose in everything that's happening. Like here, the amount of people that are complaining about the weather, and it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? I remember when I was a steam fitter, there was a guy in the crew, and he used to always say, it's better than no weather at all. So if you really think about it, I mean, what happens when we lose our environment? We expire. So it's cold and there's snow, but we can still live in it. It's still supporting our lives. And as long as you have life, then why not celebrate it on any level? But use your creativity, use your imagination, use your mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, speaking of the snow, I bought this little Snow Joe, and battery powered, and this machine is incredible. So it's taking the snow removal to a whole new level, and I just have so much fun with it, seeing it spit the snow out, and carving, paths through the driveway. I mean, so I guess you're right. I mean, you can color anything to be whatever it is that you want, and if you make it fun, whistle while you work, right? And it does make something like, this snowfall that much easier to cope with, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even a shovel. Be thankful you have a shovel. If that's what you've got, it's better than trying to dig it out with my hands. That anything, whatever it is that you have, celebrate it. And with that, I think it's time that we might start closing the show. So I would like to invite those to follow us on our Spiritual Advance, as this week we're going to start moving into the 12th house and the whole thing of unity consciousness. And so with that, I'll wish everybody a good day, and namaste, and I'll give it back to you.
Well, thank you. And in closing, don't forget, listeners, please visit our website. You can follow Swami on Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook. And don't forget, you can also access online classes through our website. But do keep those comments and questions coming. We do enjoy hearing from you. And be sure to tune in next week. We'll be discussing the new moon in Pisces conjunct Neptune. So it's a great time to begin awareness of unity of consciousness. So thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.